going to dig past the surface of wealth and really look at its underlying mechanics. We're not talking about how you can build it. Instead, we're going to analyze its fundamental structure. So let's start by taking apart the way we usually think about it.
You know, when we talk about wealth, the conversation almost always lands on ownership. Owning stocks, a house, a business. And look, that view isn't wrong, but it's incomplete. It's really just the first layer of the system.
Because the deeper, and frankly, more powerful layer isn't just about what you own, it's about what you control. Real wealth is positional. It's the authority to decide how capital gets deployed. And that right there, that's what we call the decision layer.
Okay, so to really get this, let's first break down a core power of wealth, what we call the allocation advantage. This is where you can see how control literally dictates the speed at which money grows.
It is absolutely crucial to understand the structural difference between income and wealth. See, income is a flow. It's temporary. You have to keep earning it. If the work stops, the income stops. But wealth is a stock. It's a durable, independent pool of capital that can generate returns all by itself, completely separate from your day-to-day labor.
So having a stock of wealth gives you something that income alone just can't. Capital allocation authority. You're not just earning anymore, you are now directing. This control is what determines how fast your capital compounds. It also gives you a buffer to absorb risk, and it creates liquidity, which gives you the freedom to make strategic moves, or just to wait for the perfect moment.
And the differences control makes isn't trivial. It's huge. Research looking at the years 2004 to 2015 shows a stark contrast. A $1 investment for someone in the 75th percentile of wealth, that grew by about 50%. But for the top 0.1%, that same dollar generated a 140% return. And what's really fascinating is this isn't just about taking bigger risks. Studies actually show the wealthy get higher returns even on traditionally safe assets.
And this brings us to a really core concept, optionality. It's the strategic freedom that wealth buys you. Because you can absorb potential losses, you can afford to have a much longer time horizon. You're not forced into a bad sale during a downturn or pushed to jump on a weak opportunity just because you have to. This difference in time horizons, this asymmetry, is a massive and often invisible structural advantage.
So you have this huge built-in advantage, and then it gets amplified by a system that is, pretty much by design, a tale of two different markets. Let's dig into the structural asymmetry of who even gets to access the best opportunities in the first place.
So in the US, access to private markets, we're talking startups, venture capital, private equity, where so much of the explosive growth can happen, it's legally restricted. The SEC has a rule for what's called an accredited investor, and it basically acts as a gatekeeper. To get past it, you need a net worth over $1 million or a consistent annual income over $200,000. Now, the idea is to protect smaller investors, but the effect is that it creates a structural moat, splitting the investment world into two separate tiers.
And even in the public markets, the ones that are accessible to everybody, there's a huge divide in behavior and information. Retail investors, on average, tend to chase things that have had high recent returns. They react to hype, and often that means they get in after the big growth has already happened. Institutional investors, they're playing a completely different game. They're closely monitoring everything, using complex risk-adjusted models, and very often they're getting access to key information before it hits the mainstream. It's a structural information advantage.
And this isn't just a theory. The data backs it up completely. One study that compared the performance of large-cap mutual funds found that the institutional funds beat their retail counterparts in 32 out of 36 different comparisons. That is not a coincidence. It's a direct reflection of the structural leverage that comes from better information, closer monitoring, and more disciplined strategy.
Now, this gap, this asymmetry, it becomes even more extreme when we shift our focus to those private markets we talked about, the world that's pretty much exclusively for accredited and institutional investors.
And we can actually put a number on the reward for having that access. According to MSCI, private equity buyout funds have outperformed public markets by about 3.8% annually. Now, that might not sound like a huge number, but when you compound it over decades, it creates an absolutely massive divergence in outcomes. It's a structural advantage, and it's reserved for those who are already inside the gate.
So let's recap. We've established that wealth is really about decision control, and it's built on these structural advantages in allocation, access, and information. So what happens when you drop a technology as powerful as artificial intelligence into this system? Does it level the playing field, or does it just act as an institutional accelerator?
Well, for large capital holders, AI isn't some fun consumer tool. It's an industrial strength amplifier. It's being used to automate incredibly complex operations, things like managing entities, global compliance, and reporting to stakeholders. It just reduces all the friction and operational drag for those who are already managing huge pools of capital, making their whole system that much more efficient.
And at the decision layer itself, AI just acts as a multiplier. It dramatically speeds up prediction and shrinks the time it takes to analyze mountains of data. It enhances portfolio optimization by modeling thousands of variables at once, and it lowers the cost of coordinating complex strategies across the entire globe. For those who have the capital and the data to use it, AI is providing immense structural leverage.
And this brings us to a critical point. AI's benefits are not spread around evenly. Not at all. The amplification effect is way, way greater for institutions, for capital allocators, and for the owners of infrastructure. There's a fundamental difference between just using an AI tool and owning the institutional system that leverages that tool at scale. Which of course brings us right back to that central question. Is this new technology a great democratizing force? Or is it just pouring gasoline on a fire that was already burning, accelerating the advantages for those who are already positioned at the top of the structure?
So, let's bring all this together. As we've seen, wealth is fundamentally different from income. It isn't just about a big number in an account. It is sustained structural control over three key things: the deployment of capital, the flow of information, and the manipulation of timing.
And the thing about this structure is that it's inherently self-reinforcing. The very advantages that wealth gives you, the higher returns, the exclusive access, the information asymmetry, they become the engine for accumulating even more wealth. It's a feedback loop where positional advantage just creates more and more advantage.
And based on the evidence we're seeing, artificial intelligence does not appear to be the force that's going to dismantle this self-reinforcing structure.
Instead, it acts as an accelerator for those already positioned at the decision layer, the ones who control capital allocation. It makes the efficient even more efficient. It grants more leverage to those who already have it. And that is the core structural reality of the system we're left to consider.